Good afternoon, and thank you for participating in today's webinar, Your Dynamics GP Roadmap, Exploring Business Central. A little about Forvis Mazars. We are an independent member of Forvis Mazars Global, a leading professional services network. Ranked among the largest public accounting firms in the U.S., our team members are dedicated to providing an unmatched client experience through the delivery of assurance, tax, and consulting services. As part of the firm's consulting services, Business Technology Services provides analysis, design, implementation, upgrade, training, and support services for accounting and ERP systems and sales and marketing CRM systems. Our end-to-end solutions can help clients achieve their digital transformation goals. At a glance, these are the technologies Business Technology Services supports. Today, we'll be focusing on Microsoft Dynamics GP and Dynamics 365 Business Central ERP. Our presenters today are Jason Lane and Jeremy Adkins-Hill. Jason is a manager at Forvis Mazars and has more than 20 years of experience helping clients select best fit software and services. In that time, Jason has worked with a variety of industries and business technologies. Today, Jason works with clients to help them better understand the Microsoft Dynamics 365 cloud ecosystem. It's his aim to provide clients with necessary resources and help connect them with the right professionals with certified Microsoft experience, specifically for Business Central and Power Platform applications, so they can move forward in achieving their business goals. Jeremy is a managing consultant and has deep experience with Microsoft Dynamics GP and Business Central. He has more than 10 years of experience implementing and supporting ERP, manufacturing, and supply chain systems. Prior to joining Forvis Mazars, he worked in the manufacturing, retail, restaurant, and distribution industries. In addition, he is currently attending Kent State University, working towards a master's in accounting. He holds multiple certifications with Microsoft. So again, thank you for participating in today's webinar. I do want to throw it out there. There is a ton of information on these slides, so please check out the related content box within the webinar platform and feel free to download this presentation because some of the slides we're probably going to cover a little fast, but there's dynamite content in here. So now off to Jason. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate it. And welcome, everybody. I'll echo Sarah's sentiment, and we appreciate your time and the opportunity to really have a good discussion today. Obviously, we're sharing a lot of information, but we expect, some questions and some additional information to follow. And also, as Sarah said, this is a lot of content. So, this is a hot topic for a lot of clients. We wanted to really put a lot of information in there that's going to be helpful. So I really expect a couple of things. One, please go get the recording when you're done because you can rehash this information. You could go through the slides a little slower, but also with that is a PDF copy of this presentation that you can download. So again, where we might touch on some things at a high level and kind of get through some of the slides a little quicker, you'll be able to revisit that information and make sure you can gather what you need to help with your decision process as you start to look for your steps forward. So our objectives are pretty straightforward. We're going to really talk about the kind of the upfront work, the assessment process, looking into sort of those details around what a project might look like and developing that roadmap and moving forward, and of course, discussing Business Central. I wanted to say right out of the gate that we just received approval recently to offer a free assessment for GP clients. This is something we're working with Microsoft, and this is a really unique opportunity for us to be able to have some consultants talk with you to help us understand your needs and learn from you, but just as importantly, have you start to have that discussion with us or with our team to really start to be able to understand what that roadmap might look like, what to expect when designing a new system, most importantly, how to fit the new environment to your business and operational needs appropriately. And that's going to be really the crux of this entire discussion. Now, our agenda, obviously we're going to talk a little bit about the end of support. We want to get that out front and make sure we kind of clarify if you haven't seen the official announcements or just kind of reiterate what you've already seen. Go into that migration process. Jeremy's going to really provide some good context on what he sees from a consulting perspective, talk about that new ERP environment, and of course, potential next steps. So as you all know, some information has been shared from Microsoft over the last couple of years. This is just sort of rehashing some of those initial announcements that were made from a licensing perspective. More importantly, looking at the updates and support new timelines that have been announced based on the end of life discussion that was announced in September. Obviously, the real point here is the fact that GP was announced at end of life for 2029. You can see the date of 2031 with respect to security patches, but really that date of 2029 is what to focus on. And if you think about it now, we're 5 years away. In the world of ERP, in the world of complex projects, that's not very long. And so, as Microsoft states, their flagship product for the SMB space, as they define it, is Microsoft's Business Central. So, we strongly recommend as a partner to really start thinking about that plan, start working with us or working with a partner to be able to understand what it's going to take to design a new system, to migrate appropriately off of GP, and to really modernize for what could be easily your next 10, 15, 20 years plus. This is more of a visual, and again, all this information will be provided in the PDF file that's attached to this recorded webinar. And here we have our first question of the day.
Yes, our first polling question. So what aspect of the migration process are you most interested in learning about? So A, data migration, B, system configuration, C, user training, D, all potential benefits, overall potential benefits. Jason, how about you?
You know what? Data migration always comes up. It's one of the most important topics in each and every one of our conversations. I'm still learning about the data migration options.
I want to zoom ahead. Mine would be B, system configuration.
Nice. Makes sense.
There's a lot of similarities and functionality between GP and Business Central, but there's differences that are like exciting to me as like a technology enthusiast. All right, results are in.
All right. All right, so Jeremy's going to come in here and help me a little bit on these next couple of slides. So we want to jump into that, really kind of the nuts and bolts, if you will, of the migration process and things to start thinking about. And Sarah actually teed it up perfectly when we start thinking about configuring your new environment. And so if you think about it from my perspective, I work oftentimes with prospective clients, right? I mean, we're having those discussions in what we call the pre-sales phase, which is, you haven't committed to an engagement. You're not even sure if maybe Business Central is going to be the right fit for you. But oftentimes the questions that we see are, as you can see on the screen, functionality, remote access, even AI Copilot's been a hot topic for the last year, and it's only going to be more important as you go forward, and certainly upgrades and things to compare what you're used to in your on-prem environment. But that first bullet point, the functionality, I think that's one of the areas, and Sarah just sort of alluded to this, configuring a new environment, really understanding, obviously you have your system set up based on how you're doing business today and your technology needs. What does that look like in a new modern environment? And so one of the things to consider is, even though it's a Microsoft product from GP going into a Microsoft product in Business Central, there are some differences. There is a learning curve, and a modern cloud environment is a highly configurable system generally. Business Central certainly is. So there's a lot of things to discuss when looking at the options to configure Business Central appropriately. Jeremy, I'd love to get your take on kind of your discussions with clients around the functionality piece of this.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of rumblings and clients hear a lot of rumors about what Business Central does or doesn't do when it compares to GP. But at the end of the day, Jason, everything that we can do in GP today, we can do in Business Central. We just do it a little bit differently, right? We get to things a little bit differently. Like take, for instance, in GP, we launch an icon from our desktop and we launch an application. We're at Business Central. We're going to go to a website. We're going to log on securely from anywhere without that reliance to be on network or in the office. So that modern approach to things is different, but at the end of the day, we're going to produce financial reports. We're going to satisfy our customers' needs, and we're going to keep everybody busy day in and day out.
Great points. Great point, Jeremy. I appreciate that context. Yeah, I always say that the simplest terms for me with any software platform is gaining better visibility and more control, and that's all predicated on your data, moving data around to the right people at the right time. Now, when we dive a little bit further into this same subject, again, from my perspective, talking to prospective clients, a couple of things come up. With user interface, you can look at recorded demos right now. We have multiple webinars on Business Central here at Forbes Mazars on our own site. The Power Platform integration is definitely a topic that we talk about a lot in reporting, right? Pulling the data out of the system. What does that look like? What are the improvements? What are things that we can talk about to make sure we enhance the reporting? Maybe the reporting you're doing today in GP isn't sufficient, or you have some gaps. So Jeremy, I guess similar to the last slide, what are your thoughts kind of around that Power Platform integration, and then maybe a thought or two on reporting?
Yeah, I think it makes things a little bit easier for the end user. You don't have to have those technical capabilities that we had with GP. So from an end user standpoint, we empower the end user to do a little bit more on their own. One thing that is a little bit different for those technical people who are used to getting into SQL and having direct access to that data, we lose that direct access, which for the accounting folks should make them a little bit happier, because some of that gap compliance and some of those accounting concerns that we have, that the auditors have, goes away because we can't get to that data behind the scenes and modify it. So then how do we do it, right? That's the next logical question. If we can't get to it, then how do we do it? And that's really what data sets in Business Central. So there's a lot of canned data sets out of the box, and we rely on those. And then where we need to, we can modify those data sets and put other pieces of data in there that we don't have today, or that doesn't come out of the box. So at the end of the day, the same reports that you're getting today, the same reporting technologies, plus some that are not so great today in the GP world, you get access and you can take advantage of some of that stuff. It's just the avenue that we get there is slightly different.
Great, thanks, Jeremy. You'll notice that last bullet point around user licenses. So this is obviously an important differentiation. As you can imagine, more named licenses in a cloud environment versus your concurrent licensing structure in an on-prem environment. Now with Business Central, you can see there's two different license types. There's really three. Team Member is something that Microsoft offers with most of their business applications. If you're familiar with Dynamics Sales or Customer Service, they have a Team Member license. It's the same with Business Central. So that's more your limited user license. But from your full access user license, and I say full access, everything's designed with securities and permissions. There's Business Central Essentials. Think of your accounting or financial package, if you will. And then with Business Central Premium, the primary difference is you're adding manufacturing functionality, as you can see, as well as service management functionality. So again, very distinct use case scenarios there. I think the key takeaway with your licenses, especially as we think about that assessment process or working with your partner, is that our consultants will help you set up your license base appropriately based on your business and operational needs. You don't want to overpay for licensing. Microsoft is very competitive pricing-wise in the licensing space relative to ERP. But most importantly, you want to make sure you're set up correctly from day one, based on those roles, based on those users, and obviously how the system's going to go to work for you. Jeremy, is there anything you'd like to add on this slide?
Yeah, I think one thing to keep in mind, and this really targets those users in GP that use payroll today, there is no native payroll inside of Business Central. So that's something slightly different. That doesn't mean you can't do payroll on your own anymore. We just got to choose a couple of different paths to do that, right? Either via an extension or via payroll service that we integrate that data back into. So you don't lose the ability to do payroll. It's just where it lives and how it is a little bit different. The other thing I wanted to touch on, Jason, is this notion that Microsoft was a complete solution, fully developed, and Business Central is new to the marketplace, right? So if it's new to the marketplace, can it really do what GP could do for all those years and all the time that we have invested in? And ultimately, at the end of the day, yes, it can do absolutely everything that GP did, and it can do some things that GP couldn't do. I've thrown up some things here on the slide, some things that are important to most organizations, right, that Business Central can do today, and these are things that GP can do today as well. So if I were to list everything, one slide wouldn't be adequate enough. We would need multiple slides to cover all of that functionality. But really, what I want people to leave this conversation with is when you hear those rumors about it being an inferior solution or an incomplete solution, talk with your partner, call us at Forvis Mazars, and let us demonstrate to you that that's a myth. It's a sales tactic to get people away from Business Central, and it just doesn't make a lot of sense if you think about it.
Great points.
If we dive in a little bit more on the user experience, and I think this is more for the technical resources, if for those that are on the call, when we look at the technical side of GP and Business Central, so we know functionality wise the two applications get us to the same spot at the end of the day, but what about on the technical side? In Business Central, Jason, we have less of this reliance on developers and specialized solutions specific just to one platform, because that's what a lot of solutions were. They were specific just for GP. There's still third parties, there's still ISV solutions, but what Microsoft has done is they've introduced AppSource. And with AppSource, we take all of those solutions and we make it readily available so that end users can get to it and do their own research. Us as partners, what are we here for, Jason? To educate and to guide and to make sure that they're choosing the right solutions so that they're taking as much advantage of the system out of the box as possible, and just really building upon it and solidifying and really taking their business to the next level with additional solutions that they may need. Does that make sense?
That's a great point, Jeremy. And I'm glad you brought that up about the app source. For me, in more layman's terms, I often think about it as the Google Play in your Android phone or the App Store in your iPhone, right? So you have all these very specialized, unique tools that you can help scale and evolve your system as your business does. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, absolutely. Jason, you get a lot of questions about reporting, I'm sure. I know on the consulting side, this is probably 2/3 of my time is talking about reporting and data and how do we get to it, right?
Yep.
So if we look at reporting between GP and Business Central, there's a lot of commonalities there, right? GP did a lot out of the box. Business Central does a lot out of the box. Some of those tools, what Microsoft has done in modern ERP is rely on some of those tools that we use in the rest of our business, like Word and Excel. I think one of the coolest things in Business Central is in GP, we could write Excel refreshable reports that would bring data down. You click a button, it refreshes, and you get that kind of real-time look at your data. That functionality still exists in Business Central. But one thing that it does that GP didn't do is when we pull that data down into Excel, there's actually processes that we can use to update that data and push it back into Business Central. Journal entries and things like that, where we're more comfortable working in Excel, or we have users that are a little bit more challenged in technology, give them the tools that they're used to working with and let them work in that, and let's update the system that way. From a reporting standpoint, I don't know that there's a GP user in the world that doesn't rely on SmartList, right? That ad hoc type reporting. So having an external application or an application or a portion of the system like SmartList, it's a little bit different in Business Central, right? It's Excel based. We call them lists, but this is another thing that we hear a lot about is you're going to lose SmartList and you're going to lose the ability to do that ad hoc reporting. Again, just something that's not true. Just it's a different tool. It works a little bit differently, but at the end of the day, you're still getting the data and you're getting it in a way that's useful to you. Can we talk just a second about kind of the key difference between GP and BC though, Jason? I think most users, this is a screenshot here of a GP home screen, and really what I wanted to point out is the graphical menu, the interface itself. We're used to going to modules. Everybody's used to, we know if we want to update a customer record, we're going to cards, sales, customer, things like that, that menu driven system. Unfortunately, in Business Central, that goes away. And I say unfortunately, because it's a shift in mentality, right? It's doing things a little bit differently. But ultimately, I think at the end of the day, as an end user, and when I made that move from GP to BC, it took a little bit of adjusting and getting comfortable, but I actually feel more empowered and it feels easier to find stuff, not having to remember which menu, where in the system we go to, and how do we get to things. So this is a Business Central main screen here, and you can immediately see there's no menu system, right? We got some hot links at the top, but what we're going to rely on is search functionality in Business Central. And ultimately, when we talk about artificial intelligence and Copilot, this is where some of those plugins we're starting to see where it helps us. So in GP, if I wanted to go and create a new GL account, I had to go to cards, finance, account. Here in Business Central in the top right-hand corner, just like in our other Office applications, I hit that search button and just start typing in what I want to do. And it easily and quickly gets me to that chart of accounts list where I just go to that list and add my new account to the bottom.
Thanks again, Jeremy, for sharing some of those insights between GP and Business Central. It's super helpful. And we'll go back and let's sort of revisit this idea of the assessment, right? And I mentioned up front, we have the opportunity to offer a free assessment for GP clients, and we welcome you to reach out as soon as you'd like to engage in a conversation. I might be the one talking to you or one of my colleagues, and we'll just have a conversation up front and really make sure that that assessment's appropriate for you and makes sense. Our consulting team has done a variety of different assessments for many years now. This is something that we recommend with all of our clients. If you came to us and had no ERP and just wanted to sit down and talk about your best options, we would highly recommend an assessment, which is going to be around your business and operational needs. This is no different. You happen to be a GP client. Obviously, we have an understanding of that. We have an active and robust GP client base, as well as, of course, our BC client base and the consulting practices that help both of those environments or both of those audiences. And so with that said, with the assessment, it's a wonderful opportunity for you to learn more about us as a partner, but most importantly for us to be able to take that information and really just give you, as you see on the right, the deliverables between the fit gap, looking at total cost of ownership, present your findings to you and your stakeholders so you can start that discussion, align internally on what you need to do to take these next steps, but really have all those expectations laid out on exactly what this is going to look like. As many of you may know, there's a high rate of ERP deployment failure on some level. It could be as simple as just not getting the most out of your system. It can be a little more significant in the sense that you're, perhaps you didn't gain as many efficiencies you'd like. You still have some manual processes or some disjointed systems. All of that work that you put up front, it's starting with the assessment, starting with the conversations with your partner, is going to pay off when it's done correctly. And that's, I think, the take-home message with looking at this opportunity to engage in a free discussion with partner around this assessment opportunity. Jeremy?
Yeah, thanks. So when we talk about the assessment, one thing we want to look at is Business Central the right fit? One, if we know we want to make that move from GP to BC, we just want to validate that we're doing the right thing for the client and that the client's making the right decision. Or two, if the client isn't sure which system makes sense for them, we would do what's called a fit gap. So we spend some time and we talk about what are your business needs, and we do that by functional area and sub areas. And we detail all those requirements out. Are they required? Are they nice to haves? Is it a value add? Is it a mandatory? And really, we develop this scoring system where at the end of the fit gap, it either justifies that Business Central is the right choice, or if we're evaluating multiple solutions for the client, or if the client's evaluating multiple solutions, then it just helps them solidify purely from a functionality standpoint. Is Business Central, or is there another solution out there that makes the most sense for them? And it really is that, based on requirement only. So we're not talking about cost or anything like that. The fit gap is purely around functionality and is it the right fit. Once we do that, then we start to look at the cost of the solution or the solutions, right? So one thing to call out is the numbers that are on here is really just a sample, but this would be numbers similar to like a medium to large size business in manufacturing and distribution. So that's important because the price tag in a larger implementation specific to manufacturing distribution is going to be more, right, Jason, because of the
Right.
intricacies and the uniqueness to those types of businesses. So I don't want people to see numbers and say, whoa, this is way more than what I thought. This is numbers for a very specific type of an environment. What we typically see is Business Central out of the gate tends to have a little bit of a higher cost, mostly because the implementation costs are a little bit higher. Software, nobody in the marketplace in modern ERP can compete from a software cost standpoint. It's purely on the consulting side. Then when we look at those solutions over a we call it total cost of ownership, but it's really like a 5-year span. What we see 100% of the time, or the majority of the time, is that Business Central over an extended period of time is the most economical solution. So now what you have to do is say, from a functionality and a total cost of ownership standpoint, and that's how we develop that full picture for what makes the most sense and really justifies that we're making the right choice. After we kind of put that fit gap and costing aside, the other thing we like to do is really document out, to the clients, what did we hear from you during this process? What's important? What does your business do on a day-to-day basis? What systems do you have in place? And really, what's your process flow? To kind of buckle all that up, then we talk about risks, right? Projects are laden with risk, and some of those are controllable, some of those are not controllable. But we really rank those risks and we score those out as well, so you can understand going into an implementation, what's the likelihood that we encounter difficulties or that it's more successful. With that, we'll take a short break here and we'll go into that next question.
Yes, polling question 2. Do you have concerns about working with your current Microsoft partner, technology partner, on your migration from GP? So if you are not an active GP user, feel free to select not applicable. But I've brought a team of consultants. I have been a Salesforce consultant before, and I've worked as an end user with different consultants. So, there's no judgment here. It's just a yes or no. Like, yeah, I like what I'm seeing here. I want to explore this detailed assessment. And then also, there's some great engagement happening with the audience today, and we are doing our best to answer these questions in the back end. Just feel free to submit the questions because we will get a report with all the questions so we can follow up with you if we don't have time to address your questions live. All right, so a few of you feel secure and some of you don't, and that's okay. So just know that Q4 may be for you. All right, back to you, Jeremy.
Thanks, Sarah. So kind of wrapping up the assessment itself, at least on the deliverable, the document side of things, whether it's one solution, Business Central we're looking at, or multiple solutions, we really break down that solution. So what is the solution that we're recommending? What are the pros and cons in moving forward with that solution? A more detailed breakdown of the costs, and then any sort of materials or supplements to that solution that would be important for your organization to consider. So that would kind of round out the second deliverable, the fit gap being the first, and then the readout of the document of the assessment being the second. And then lastly, what we get into is the presentation itself, right? So we give you those documents to digest, read over, and then what we do is is we do a presentation with you, and we summarize those findings and the things that we've done, and give that to you in a PowerPoint format. So specialize to your business, and I'll let Jason run through these slides.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. Yeah, we thought at the end of the day, taking advantage of the opportunity to kind of walk you through what we would do to present our findings, but also help you understand who we are as a partner, right? I think anytime you're evaluating complex software or any software, you want to understand the partner that you're working with, the consultants that are going to be on site with you and working through your business and operational processes and working with your stakeholders. And so we would typically start off with kind of that discussion. I always look at this as, how are you gaining credibility with somebody that you've never met before? Now, some of you out there may be our GP clients and have some good understanding of what we can do. Others obviously have not worked with us. You want to understand the credentials, the credibility, the experience. And so for us as a Microsoft partner, we're proud to be one of the top partners, relatively speaking, with Microsoft. I think with this year's Inner Circle Award that we were given, that puts us in not only in the top 1% of the partners, but out of tens of thousands of partners globally, I think we're one of only 78 to receive that award. And that's sort of a recognition on the kind of work we do, the certifications we have in the 365 stack, the volume of work we do, the quality of work we do with our clients, and of course, just in general, kind of being on that cutting edge with technology, working with things like Copilot, robotic process automation, custom development, and integrations. But I think also more specifically to this conversation, we have I mentioned a GP practice. We've been working with GP clients for over 30 years. We've been working with Business Central since its release in 2018. So really tying that conversation together from a consulting perspective is something that we can do seamlessly, and obviously carry that into our conversations with you. And again, laying out that roadmap for deploying Business Central. This is a little bit more of a visual as you think about the ecosystem. And I'll probably say that word again a couple times before we close out the presentation today. But as you all are well aware, everything from your Azure base to very specific applications, Microsoft has a lot of offerings, and that is always a part of this conversation, especially when considering moving into a modern cloud environment from Microsoft. And so, we like to just kind of wrap our thoughts around what that looks like for you outside of just specifically Business Central. You'll hear the phrase, if you haven't already, modern workplace. And this is something that's sort of been coined by Microsoft, and they say it best, right? You're looking at the intersection of people, process, and technology, which is very important. You cannot overlook the people part of this. That's obviously a very complex part of this, let alone the complexity behind the technology, and of course, the processes that ties it all together. And so this is kind of, something that drives our philosophy or drives our approach when we're working with clients, is ensuring that we're covering all the spaces as we start with the assessment, as we start with our discovery calls with you prior to an assessment, and then working that methodology throughout our process. And again, if we were presenting this to you, this is something that we would provide in terms of a high-level cost range. And again, as Jeremy alluded to a couple slides ago, this is an example that's most likely from a distribution manufacturing company with heavy production planning. Your core financial, for those of you on GP who are only using basically the accounting or the financial package, your services fees are going to be far less than this. So just wanted to be clear on that. But this is a good example of a very complex rollout and what that can look like. Another thing I wanted to point out here is in this example, we have 45 full users. If you don't know already, Business Central only requires a minimum of one essential or one premium user for your organization. I talk to quite a few QuickBooks clients who might be 1 or 2 or 3 users, 5 users. They are oftentimes great candidates for Business Central. This is why it's, as Microsoft mentioned in that release, as we started the presentation, that Business Central is their flagship for what they define as the SMB market. The reason being is because it can be a very capable, very robust system for a shop of 2 or 3 users, or for a shop of 200 users. So there's quite a bit of scale in between. Now, going back to how we have those discussions, starting with that assessment up front, starting with the discovery and our interviews with you and your users, your stakeholders, and then working through the configuration, the design, and ultimately the delivery of your production environment. We call this our on-track methodology or on-track process. Now, from start to finish, nothing terribly different than what a lot of partners would do. You have to understand and learn up front. We'd move into design. We're configuring your system based on what we've learned. We're helping you through the testing process. We're training you. But I think one thing that I always like to point out with our approach, our consultants are with you from day one, from the kickoff meeting through cutover support, through that go live process. We typically add 30 to 45 days, maybe more post cutover, that we're there to support you while you're in your live environment. You're getting to that first month end close from a financial perspective. You're moving pieces of data around, you're accessing information. We want to make sure your users are comfortable and seamlessly using the system as they should be, as it's been designed. And so that's an important point that I like to make, that we don't hand off knowledge or hand off experience, or I should say, those conversations that our consultants were having in those early stages to different consultants at the end of that. In fact, given the opportunity to have long-term support with you, we would generally have those same consultants involved, whether it's an ad hoc support model or something like a managed services model. And that's very important for that first year. You could even say the first couple years as you're really getting into your system. Maybe you're scaling the system already in the first couple years, and this is an area that's going to be key for your long-term success. This just dives in a little bit further in some of some of those stages, a little more granularity around kind of what that looks like from a process standpoint, and really the overall strategies we're talking with you as a partner. And even further diving into some of those steps, I think, again, it's important to note that a lot of that work up front and that analysis and design phase is going to be crucial to the success of this as you get to go live and as you looked at using this system for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And I think one thing I'd like to point out as well, and this is something that we share with all of our clients, we've kind of alluded to the fact that obviously with a modern cloud environment, a lot of the systems are like this, but especially Business Central, they're highly configurable. And so when we say the word configurable, we're not meaning customization. For those of you who've been on an on-prem system for many years, you're used to things that are potentially customized. Maybe you've patched some things together. You've got some very unique integrations, some things that work based on what the system can provide. These modern cloud environments out of the box are really flexible. It's native to how they're designed. And so that's a really good thing ultimately. What it means for us is we want to leverage that as much as possible. So our conversations around best practice, around what your business needs are, around how you're using things today, they're going to evolve essentially around what the system can do for you. So think about it in two ways. There's a lot of things you all have to do a certain way, and you just have to have it done that way. Oftentimes the flexibility, or I should say the configurability in Business Central, is there to be able to design around that. And then the other half of that story is, oftentimes there's things you're doing just because you have limitations within an older environment, or things have been pieced together, or perhaps GP was rolled out when your company structure was completely different. Maybe you've divested in some divisions, or you've grown, and now there's things that have been pieced together. Now we're looking at that entire big picture and saying, look, what do we have to wrap around what you're doing, and where can we find those enhancements and improvements? As you can imagine, if you're buying anything new, you would expect some improvements, some greater efficiencies, better workflows, better automations, and of course, as I mentioned before, better visibility and control around your data. So this is something that's crucial to our philosophy going into every single engagement with our ERP clients. And as I sort of already mentioned, reduce the customizations. We have the technical capabilities to do it if needed. We would prefer not to if the system can be configured to fit that. Targeting realistic scope and enabling self-sufficiency. Again, with the high rate of potential failure for ERP deployments, being realistic up front, setting those expectations with you before we ever get into an engagement is of the utmost importance, and ultimately getting you to that point where you can gain self-sufficiency. Part of this is also being completely transparent with you, helping you understand the resources that are required on your end. You all have your day jobs, you do day in and day out. You have to balance that with putting time into a software deployment. We're going to help you understand what that team should look like, the roles between your stakeholders and users. And we're even going to break that down in a timeline here in the next slide, or the next couple slides, I think. But then we're also going to be transparent with you and share with you exactly what our team's going to look like. So you can expect what that interaction is going to be, what the expertise we're bringing to the table, if you will, and how that conversation is going to unfold at each step of the way. And as I mentioned with the timeline, this is a little busy, just so you know. This is a really good example of what to expect over the next several months if you're engaging in that BC rollout. we don't have to get this granular or this busy with our timeline. We can keep it more high level. But I think it's important to know, again, going back to what your expectations are for the time you have to put in and the resources you're going to need available as you balance your day jobs, you balance other initiatives, and you look at this process over the next 4, 5, 6 months and beyond if it's a more complex rollout. All right, so let's get to our third polling question.
Whew, a lot of great information. Yes, we are on polling question number 3. So what ERP are you considering? Are you considering Business Central? Are you looking at Sage Intacct? Are you looking at NetSuite, or D, other? So we did have a question come in. Yes, business technology services at Forbes Mazar. We do have 6 now premier technology provider partnerships. So we're a top 1% Microsoft Business Applications partner. We also have technology provider partnerships with Sage for Sage applications and Sage Intacct with NetSuite. And then even, if BC isn't quite the fit, like Jason talked about this, if your organization's grown, so think about where you were when you started on GP and where you are today. If you have like multi-entity, multi-currency, and you want to stay on that Microsoft stack, maybe Dynamics 365 Finance is a better fit. So lots of considerations. Yay. All right. So almost half of the people are looking at Business Central, which is perfect because that's the theme today.
And thank you for adding that, Sarah. I'll add real quickly, and I think Jeremy will jump in here to get back into a little more of the information around the implementation process. With our multiple practices, they are separate practices, so we don't cross-pollinate our consulting from a certification standpoint. But we do help with knowledge transfer, right? If we have a conversation with somebody looking at both, let's say, Sage and BC, we're certainly going to work together in the background where we can. But we do keep those practices separate from a certification standpoint, and definitely welcome the opportunity to help clients with whatever they want to look at. Jeremy?
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Sarah mentioned earlier she was excited to learn about the data side of things, and I've lived a large part of my life managing and working with data. So this is something that I love and one part of a project that excites me a lot. But let's talk about going into implementing Business Central, because really we have to take the opportunity to look at our GP environment and say, are we ready to move from GP to Business Central once we've made that decision? And oftentimes what we see is a lot of people think they're ready, but it's kind of the data you put in is the data you get out. And to take advantage of some of those migration tools and some of those things that are out there to make that easier for us is getting that data ready so that when we're ready to go, it's as clean and orderly as possible. So start with things like check links and reconcile, making sure we're doing that on a regular basis. In accounts receivable, making sure we're moving open records to history and things like that. So that's one part of the data cleanup, but the other is the master data prep. This is something that we should be doing on a regular basis anyways, but as a part of an implementation, we absolutely want to do it. So when we talk about master data prep, what are we really talking about? Standardizing the data. So making sure that when we go from GP to BC, that we don't have duplicate customers and vendors and things like that. Taking the opportunity to inactivate obsolete records. So if you haven't done business with a customer in 3 or 4 or 5 years and they're still considered an open customer, go ahead and checking that box and inactivating them. If it's an inventory item that was created and you never had activity against it, or it's been discontinued, writing off whatever remaining inventory is there, selling it, and then inactivating that inventory. And then also, deciding what do you want to do with your parts systems. Most people are in GP for 10, 15, 20 years. Do we want to take the opportunity to say that this eight-digit item number is now going to go into this nomenclature, post implementation, things like that. So taking the opportunity to do some of that. And then really just making sure that, the way that we have the system set up in GP is optimal, and we don't have some things kind of crossed up. So just making sure that classes are set up properly and that vendors are set up properly and things like that. And that just makes that transition. And as we use those import tools, it just makes the whole implementation process a whole lot simpler. And then we talk about the process itself, right? So we want to make for sure when we go in and we start to do this business central implementation that we're not rushing it first and foremost. Take our time, do it right the first time. Don't have to come back once a year, once every 2 or 3 years and say, oh, we wish we did this or we didn't think about this. Let's take our time, make sure we've really thought out the solution, and let's do it so for the next 10 to 20 years, you're set. You put a system in place that can grow with your business, and we don't have to make changes down the road. Doing that data prep, making sure the system's set up and configured properly, then getting into importing the data, validating that data, turning the system over to your end users to say that the data is in there how we expect it to be. Notice we haven't talked anything about training yet, because we really want them to just know how do we get in and how do we see and how do we verify that our data came from GP, and then we get into training. So that's really that implementation process. And I know like a few bullet points doesn't do justice for what that project plan actually looks like, Jason. And then lastly is that go live. So once we decide to go live, is where does that happen down the road, right? Medium, large implementations, 9 to 18 months. Rapid implementations, so we're talking small businesses, finance only, 6 months or less. So really understanding and realizing that that's where we need to be. We talked a little bit about the master data best practices. I'll let you guys come back and review these, but we've called out inside of GP, what is the master data? Where does it live? What modules does it live in? System setup and data imports. Just know that during an implementation that we're going to use configuration packages to get data in, and we're going to bring summary records. The only transactional records we bring is any open transactions. Data validation, if it equals this in GP, it needs to equal that in Business Central, and just understanding that that's what that means. And then trading, daily, weekly, monthly, records setup and reporting. End user acceptance testing is, once we've done training, is letting users get in and replicating their process, seeing if there's any gaps and all of that. Once we get through end user acceptance testing and clients are overall happy with the environment that they have, we do what's called cutover planning. So a group of people from you guys, the client, and a group of people from us, we get together. Typically, key stakeholders, the project manager, the executive sponsor, on our side, project leads and architects, the PM, our technology partner. We sit down, generally like an hour-long meeting, maybe a couple of hours, and we talk about what needs to be done and when are we going to go live. So now that we've tested and we've proven the system out, when are we going to make that jump and go from GP to Business Central, and when does that happen exactly? Traditionally around an end of month or a weekend or some event like that, where we can take a couple of days and have users out of the system, and that's where we do that. Cutover is that weekend or that downtime in the system where we're doing all of that, and then ultimately what it culminates with is go live on that Monday morning per se. And that's when users go live is really just that moment in time where they start entering data into the system. From a post-go live standpoint, those days and weeks and months after, it's those forgotten things. No matter how much we plan out, there's going to be things that we forget about. There's going to be things that we miss. And then when do we transition from implementation to support? We don't want to stay in implementation mode long. We want to get to support as quick as possible. And the support situation in Business Central is significantly different than GP. Much less, we see many fewer support tickets in Business Central than what we're used to in GP. It's a much more stable system. The way data moves throughout the system is much more stable. So support cases are significantly lower. And then ultimately, we shift from this mode of data entry and managing the system to how do we improve the system down the road, and really how do we bring our business to that next level. What happens after you go live? So we start to talk about other things. What does our data look like now? A lot more reliance on business intelligence. Things like dimensions. So inside of GP, we're used to that multi-segmented GL account. We don't have that. So now we have dimensions with a key. Workflows much more robust inside of Business Central. Again, we talked about payroll, not a part of Business Central, but you can still do that. Customizations, much simpler in Business Central if we need them, but we try to rely mostly on that. The ISV community is still there, but what we see in Business Central is really you guys are empowered to find your solutions, and then we have that discussion. Does this make sense for me? So we really become an advocate for you guys and really allow you to navigate that channel where traditionally on the GP side, we navigated that channel and we would bring one solution to you. Now you have hundreds of solutions to choose from, and we just help guide you and advocate for you when you find something that you need or that's going to work for you.
So Jeremy, I could jump in here. This is something I think is important. So as I'm talking to prospective clients, I think one of the biggest decisions that I should say one of the biggest factors that those of you who are already, let's say ecosystem, I mentioned that word before, is the fact that you're looking at things like around that, right? The big picture. So everything from Azure infrastructure to specific applications, developer tools, Microsoft Office. You'd be surprised looking at SharePoint as an archive, or integrating Outlook email to Business Central or to Dynamic Sales. These are some factors that are very important in your decision making, and something you may already have sort of tied into your GP environment, or something you would like to consider as you get into that more cloud base across the board. So we wanted to point this out as something that you should definitely consider, or talk to us or talk to your partner about as you're making that big decision. And so I think from here, then let's go to talk about just a brief hit on a couple next steps. We do have some other information that's in this deck that you'll be able to see around Business Central, and sort of comparing some of your options when you download the PDF. But let's get to a brief hit on some next steps, as well as one final question we had to close out the day. So with that said, again, we talk about the communication factor. Whether you reach out to Sarah, our marketing team, or myself or Jeremy directly, that's the start of this process. We have these conversations up front. We have a team dedicated to have what I will say, non-build discussions with you, our opportunity to learn about you, to share more about Business Central, to share high-level costs, to start to develop that project plan. But most importantly, again, I encourage you to look out, to reach out and look for that GP assessment, that free assessment that we're offering for you to be able to help work through this process. Again, consulting time for free, no strings attached, to be able to start this process to develop that roadmap for you. And I think one more thing that's important to note is, again, that licensing discussion. So looking at your next year, looking at your possible 3 years, tying that all together. Do you have a Microsoft agreement in place? Or is this going to be a standalone CSP provided licensing? So we mentioned we don't have the pricing on here. Microsoft is one of the most competitive ERP costs from a licensing perspective on the market. It's really no other system can compete. And knowing, because we have those practices here, generally speaking, we're going to be far less from a licensing or long-term cost perspective, a little bit more upfront potentially on the services because of that configurability, because of the flexibility that's in Business Central. But when you look at years 2, 3, 4, and 5, you're easily getting your money back from an investment standpoint, and your long-term cost of ownership is going to be far less than those other systems that are out there that are generally much, much higher from a licensing standpoint. And the flexibility is there. So as you can imagine with Microsoft, of course, you can add licenses throughout, but if you just do that 1-year term out of the gate, you can then scale back licensing if you need to, if you have any significant changes in your structure. All right, so again, in light of just running out of time, we have one more question we want to get to before we close this out. I think we've gotten the message across, and I can't thank Jeremy enough for his input from a consulting standpoint. That's invaluable input. He talks to clients day in and day out. He sees this on the ground level, if you will. And again, we're just touching on the surface on this. We even have more information we haven't shared in this deck alone. So just know that, we appreciate your time today in talking with us. Nothing is more important than us understanding that current situation of yours and helping you through that process, just as it is for you to learn more about us. And again, we welcome more conversations going forward. I think I mentioned this before, in high level, 47,000 GP clients as of today that are going to need to look to get off a GP in the next 5 years. So that's a huge number. And that's something that I think would help, at least with your sort of understanding of what that process is going to look like and what the numbers are in the channel from a partner perspective.
Jason, we can go right back to that slide, because it's information we want to cover. But sure. Again, for those that have asked questions, thank you. And please let us know if you would like to discuss your ERP transition options. So especially for those that reached out through the Q&A about the GP assessment, the free, no cost GP assessment, please mark A. We will follow up with you. And so while everyone is locking in those answers, here you go, Jason. We can go back to this slide while people lock in yes or no for that follow-up opportunity.
Yeah, no, and I think I was kind of pointing out was when you look at GP clients alone, there's 47,000. NAV is the predecessor for Business Essentials, 110,000 clients. That's an aging system as well. So is SL. And then those folks that are wanting to come on QuickBooks. So when you look at the resources in the partner channel, the next few years are going to get very, very busy. And so again, that's why we sort of encourage you to start having those discussions today.
All right. Well, thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Jason. So much great information. And we, like you mentioned, we just scratched the surface today. Yep. So please reach out to our team here at Forbes Mazar Business Technology Services. Jason and Jeremy's contact information is up there. If you selected yes, we will be in touch with you, and we can figure out maybe schedule your free GP assessment. So again, thank you for your time today, and that's a wrap.